Hi everybody. We're here at Millie's. I'm Chris. This is Stefan.
Hey guys.
We've been doing classes here at Millie's for Department 56 displays for almost 10 years, and we were really bummed that with the COVID-19 thing, we were going to have to skip one. So we got a little bit of a crew together, and we decided to film one. I think this is going up on Saturday, April 25th.
That's right.
So happy Saturday, everybody. And so Stefan and I are just gonna make a little bit of a display. It's pretty small, but it's really simple, and we think you guys can do it at home in just an hour or so.
Yep. So thank you, Chris. So what we're going to do today, I call it a template display because you can do a single cut, and depending on how much you shift your different layers, you get different elevations. And then we're going to carve it so it looks good as well, but it's going to be a pretty simple approach to do a quick display with a little bit of foam, and then we hope to finish it so at the end you can see the entire thing. I brought 5 sheets of 2-inch foam, the normal insulation polystyrene foam. Chris cut them in half, and I stacked 6 layers together, so we have 12 inches of foam. Now I'm going to do a drawing of the outline that we're going to cut through all layers. So I'm just going to do a random one, just like that. Pretty simple. And we're going to cut through the entire stack at one time. So let's go ahead and do that, okay? Now Chris is going to cut the entire stack. If you don't have a bow cutter, you can just use a straight knife and cut maybe 3 layers at a time and just do it twice. So what we're doing here is trying to stay as straight as possible so that each layer will look the same throughout the entire stack. Takes a little while to cut through 6 layers at the same time, so you got to make sure we just let it do its thing without breaking the wire. It has happened before. And we're going to keep the rest of the foam in case we need it for the back of the display, which I will explain a little bit later.
Also, try not to cut the table while you're at it. We've done that too.
We have my toolbox. Okay, take that off. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to turn that back around. And this is what we have. So now we have an identical cut across all of them in a single cut. So now what we're going to do is shift those layers back so that we get different elevations. So for example, we could shift this one like this. So we have a pedestrian walkway down here, which I think would be kind of cool. Then we could leave 3 layers together and shift the top 2 quite a bit so that we have room for buildings here and here as well. So now, since if this is going to be pedestrians, then we can change just a little bit. I think that we don't need that much height. We're going to go ahead and maybe bring 3 like this. Keep them together. And this is going to get glued together, but we're not quite ready for that yet. Like this. And now what we have is we can have some pedestrian here, and I'm going to show how to do a little wall here, some buildings here, and some buildings here. And because this is 6 inches, and it's tall enough that you're not hiding the houses behind them. So the other thing you can do, if you want to change the layout a little bit, is you can swap this and just flip it around. And now suddenly you have at least a different kind of look just by flipping it around. Now you could have some things here, some houses here, and it's going to look different. So, and then we could even do even more and staircase through that. So now what we're going to show is we're going to show how to do the little walls. Okay, now we're going to show you how to do some little walls around the edges using, again, the same cut. So I just trace our cut over here, just like that. And we're going to make the wall only about half an inch thick. So I just go ahead and follow that and do the whole thing. And now by cutting this out, it's going to match exactly the outline over here if we want to have some little walls. And we can flip it around to make it work down here. So we're going to make a couple of copies of this. And all I need to do is trace that. And I think we'll just make 2 of them. Okay.
Do you want to use the bow cutter for that again?
Maybe
do you
let's
want to
use
use
the
a
straight.
smaller tool?
Yeah, the straight knife.
Sounds good.
So Chris is going to go ahead and cut that, and I'm going to start working on the bottom layers of the display. All right. So what Chris is doing now is cutting these walls, trying to stay as straight as possible, and then we'll be able to glue them to the edges. We're also going to put some lampposts in here so you can see how we can use the walls to hide the wires. All right, so let's do that here. I'm going to start by gluing these layers together using the low temperature glue gun.
This is a technique that Stefan has used in the village here at Millie's, actually. If you come and look at the Dickens, you can see some of these little retainer walls in the village.
That's right. Christmas Story, I did the same thing. It's a very effective way to just create some elevations and also to do the walls that Chris is talking about, which adds a little bit of character to the display. All right, so these two do go together. I'm going to glue these 3 together. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I haven't burnt anybody else but myself.
Good sign.
How's COVID-19 been treating you so far?
Well, pretty good. Nobody's caught it, so we are good shape. Now I do notice that I'm less than 6 feet away from you, but I trust you.
We are not social distancing, that is true.
That is correct. And let's see here. Put that together. All right, so we're gonna let that set a little bit. And now we've got 3 sets: the bottom layer, this middle layer, and then the back layer. And once we have our walls, we'll be able to glue that on there. Now, to make things a little interesting, we're gonna carve the front of the display, but we can use a different type of carving technique. So I'm gonna carve the bottom area a little more like stone and rock going down to like a water scene. And then this up here can be more like bricks. All right. I'm gonna take the sculpting tool. Some carving over here.
I've got 2 retainer walls. I just broke one, but that's okay. It's just going to be glued together anyway.
That's right.
No need to get frustrated.
That's correct. Sometimes it's nice to have a little gap in the wall too for the lamppost.
That's what I was thinking when I broke it.
Well played. All right. Okay. So pretty simple, quick carving so that the bottom looks a little different than the rest of the display. Okay.
I'm just peeling the film off the bottom of the retaining walls so it sticks to the base better. Sometimes if you leave the film on when you glue, they can wind up kind of separating because the film will stick to the glue, but the foam isn't actually glued, just the film. So if the film starts to peel off, the layers can delaminate.
That's right.
So as you can see, that's a perfect fit.
That's right. And I'm actually going to use that one probably at the bottom here.
Okay,
But
cool.
we'll use that one over here.
Sounds good.
So that will be nice.
With our planned breakage.
That's right. Now what we can do, if you'd like, is draw a line through them with the knife and do some bricks on
Yeah,
it, because it's a
absolutely.
little easier to do ahead of
When
time.
they're loose.
Yeah, so the tricky part that Chris is going to do now is that you got to make sure that you kind of do the engraving without going too crazy and actually cutting through. So yes, that direction. We don't have to worry too much about the lines on the inside, although if you really wanted to, you could carve it on the inside too. So, in the meantime, I will do some brick cutting, just like Chris, but on the bigger piece of foam. Here.
So what we like to do for cutting the bricks is to just start with a central line. That'll be kind of the division between the two layers of brick. And then you can come back with a knife or engraving tool after the fact and kind of make the lines for the individual bricks. So you kind of want to, just like real bricks, you want to offset them. We typically shoot for about a 1-inch brick, and then so the next one will just be offset. The next layer will just be offset by 1/2 inch or so, so that the layers are staggered.
Yeah, that looks a little more interesting than if you had stacked bricks without an offset. And the nice thing about the bricks too is that if you have a seam in the foam like I have here, because I've got 2 layers, that line, even though I can go and trace it, it's a natural line for the grout for the different brick layers. You can actually make more. I've done it before where I had 6 rows of bricks in there, but it is a little bit time consuming. And remember that a lot of this will be hidden by what's going to be sitting in front of it on your display. So you don't want to overdo it. This is quick. As you can see, just like Chris doing some straight lines. And when I say straight, I don't really mean straight. It's okay if they're not perfectly straight. It actually looks better, in my opinion, than perfectly straight lines. So now
So this is a perfect project to do while you're having your evening glass of wine.
That's right. And here's this. I don't know if you can see that in there. Okay, so you can see the different lines. So now I'm going to do the bricks. Do we have any questions? No questions.
The audience is really quiet today.
Suspicious.
Our filmographer laughed a little bit earlier, but I think we're going to cut that out.
See what Chris has there will be a perfect little wall. And then what we're going to do, you can actually do little lines at the top to complete the brick pattern. And then we can use a little sandpaper to kind of round off the edges. Do that here.
Sometimes when you peel the foam off, it leaves a little bit of that blue residue. I think you all know what I'm talking about. The sandpaper can also help eliminate those lines.
Yeah, Chris makes a good point. The foam that I'm using for the display is from Uline, which is really nice because it doesn't have any film on it. But the foam that Chris is using is 1-inch thick foam, as you can see back there, and it does have a film on it. But Uline also sells the 1-inch foam. It's a little bit pricier, but it definitely is good. So here are a close-up of the little walls that Chris has done. And what we're going to do is put the walls down here, adjust this to the right depth, just deep enough for having some figurines down here. And then we're going to glue this down and paint it. And after cutting your little walls, you'll notice that your edges are pretty sharp and easy to chip. So you just take a sandpaper or one of these little sponges, sandpaper thingies, and you just kind of smooth it out like that. Make it kind of uniform across, and this will help make sure that it's not too sharp of an edge and easy to
For the
chip.
top layer, we're not going to have a retaining wall, but what I'm going to do is kind of replicate the effect by drawing a line about 1/2 inch from the edge. And then I'll come back and continue the top layer of bricks and I'll just do that the entire way, so you get that the same effect, and the paint is going to be kind of continuous without having the retaining wall at their top.
got all the walls carved, the brick, the stone, and what we need to think about is the wires for the houses, the light bulbs. So looking at this over here, we're going to put some lampposts down here, lampposts up here, 2 houses here, and then as many as we want over there. The cord can just fall off the back. So I'm just going to make a couple of holes here and be ready for that, because once we glue the layers together, it'll get a little difficult to do.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to do that now.
What we decided we're going to do for our electrical is we're going to cut a couple of holes, and then in the bottom of this layer, we're going to cut channels that run to the back so we can get out without having to go all the way through all 3 layers. Holes through the styrofoam, you want to try to be as straight as you can. If the hole is kiltered one way or another, it makes it very difficult to get the blank out. So you just want to try to make your blade of the knife as perpendicular to the surface as you can, so that it makes it easier to get your little donut hole plugs out. So I already cut this one. What I'm doing now is I'm just taking the router tool and cutting a channel for our cords to pass all the way to the back. The nice thing about the router tool is that the wire is pretty thick. I want to say it's about 18 gauge, so it maintains its shape while you're cutting, which makes it perfect for cutting a channel like this. So I'm just going to cut 2 big ones to get our building cords to the back, and then I'll cut another smaller channel for a lamp cord to make its way back towards the bigger channel. So the way Stefan and I have this lined up, it's actually going to be a little bit precarious if you have any buildings sitting back here. The entire thing will wind up being a little back heavy. So what we did was we saved the cutoffs from when we cut all 6 of them.
Great.
So that makes a nice support structure for the back. Because they're all exactly the same thickness as the foam, which we use 2" for, you don't have to worry about cutting anything to size, because they all came from the same place.
That's right. And we're showing a 2-foot seam. This could be, like we said before, 4 foot. You can also finish the edges, but you want to make sure it's supported in the back. About doing the lamppost earlier, we already have our holes for the cords that are going to go down there into the back, but we want to make sure that this cord between them is also a little bit hidden. So we have our wall going here, and I made a little groove here, and what we're going to do is once we put our lamppost in here, we're just going to stuff this in here, maybe put a little dot of glue, put some snow there, and your wall is going to be in front of it, so you really won't see it. Now we can't do this right now because we got to paint it before we start doing this. We don't want to paint the lamppost, so we'll show that again at the end, but that's what we have done here and down here as well. It's kind of fun to do a class like that. That's a nice thing about these strips is that they're flexible.
They're so
enough.
flexible.
Yeah, you can match whatever you're trying to do. We don't even need to seam this actually. That's enough. And then yeah, let's do those 2. I don't know, I like doing the little walls. It just feels a little bit.
It definitely adds a nice detail without a lot of extra work, right? Because we already drew the line.
Yeah, it's easy to do, and it's a better finish, and then it actually hides the base of some of these things too a little bit, so it looks good.
Trying not to cover your little channel there.
Yeah, if we need to redo it, we'll redo that, but we're good. Perfect. Okay, so now we're at the stage where everything is glued together. So we did the holes for all the electrical before gluing everything. We did the grooves for the lampposts. Now the layers are glued together. The walls are glued in place, and the back support is glued in place. So now we're ready to go and paint this and start to play with the display. All right, so we decided to go outside to paint just so that we didn't have to cover everything in the store behind us. So the thing we want to do first is make sure I get in the little grooves. Now you could paint this with acrylics and a paintbrush, but this is pretty quick. So we're going to start with that. All I'm doing here is make sure I go into all these little cracks and grooves that Chris and I carved. I'm avoiding this layer because I'm going to do it more brownish tones. So now we've painted the base color gray, making sure I get in all the little lines, but one color typically isn't good enough. So I'm going to go and do the bottom here more like brown colors. Just like that, pretty simple. I'm going to take a darker brown over here. Give it some additional tones.
Because we're using mostly like earth tones, we don't even really have to worry about switching the heads on the Liquitex. So we can just go straight from one head to the other. If there's a little gray in the brown, it's not a big deal. If there's a little dark brown in the light brown, again, not a big deal.
That's right. Now I'm going to take something that looks close to black. It's actually a carbon black, so it is black. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a dusting here. May be hard to see on the video, but in person, you'll see that it makes a difference. I don't need to go too close to Chris here.
It smells nice though.
Yeah, you can see that it's still shiny, so it's still wet. It's a good time to apply some landscaping material. So I got some Woodland Scenic Snow, and it's very fine powdery, so I kind of like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just push this in over here. Maybe a bit too much. Chris will rectify the situation. And use my hand as a shield and just kind of sprinkle it from the top here. And all the flat spots will have snow on it. Just like that. Give it a little bit of a trail down there.
Like powdered sugar on a donut.
That's right. I like to do the edges, and that gives us another color on the display. And then when we populate it with the houses and accessories, we can also put more, but for now we're going to start with this. All right, so, and by the way, if you don't like doing the overhang thing, all you need to do is start with longer sheets and then offset your sheets and then cut them straight at the back so that your sides are going to be full and won't have these openings. But the idea here was to show you how to do a quick one, and then you can expand to it. So let's talk about that.
So one of the tricky parts about the electrical, doing it after the paint, is that the tail on our lamp cord is a little bit short, and it's going to be kind of tricky to get it through there. So what I wanted to show you guys was I've got a 55026 adapter here, an AC/DC adapter. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to run the adapter through first. So that just jumps straight through the hole. Then I can plug my lamp cords in and kind of fish them through without any kind of trouble. So I'm gluing that one down. It's a little tricky because our paint is still wet. And then before I glue this one down, I'm going to kind of stuff our cord into the gap that Stefan cut with the knife. And then if I want, I can put a couple little dabs of glue just to make sure it doesn't come undone. Again, it's a little tricky to get it to stick right now because the paint is still wet. But at home, you can give yourself a little more drying time before you run the cords in the electrical.
Okay, now the lampposts are glued in, and if you look from the front, you can't see the wires because that's what our little walls are for in a way to hide that. And then from the top, you can see the wires. So all you can do is just kind of get some snow, D56 or other, and just kind of fill it up on the edge there, and it's going to nicely cover your wires down here. This you can use a little bit of snow batting to cover as well, and just like that. Is now finished. It's all painted, dry, a little bit of snow, and then we put some Christmas in the City buildings and accessories. You can see the walls, kind of nice because they hide some of the white bases as well, so you can kind of use that for not just the wires but the accessories as well. We've got the hoarder with the toilet paper to celebrate what we're going through. Maybe celebrating something.
Maybe that's not quite the right word.
So what else we got, Chris?
So we wanted to thank you for tuning in. It's been kind of fun actually, but we really miss seeing you guys in person. And to that point, our next class will be on May 30th. And at that time, we will be giving away this display. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you. Then I guess we can go into the template drawing.
Yeah, okay. Hey, that sounds good. That sounds good. Okay, thanks, Chris. So what we have here is we... Oh, jeez. Made a mistake looking at her.